do an update on Sean Combs, otherwise known as P. Diddy, Puff Daddy, Puff, Diddy, Diddler. I've seen Diddler a lot lately, but there's been a lot going on this case. And we're just going to get right into a little brief, just let you know a little bit of what's been going on and just back history a little for those that are just new to the case. Sean Combs was arrested on September 16th after an FBI raiding of his homes in both Los Angeles and in Miami. He was arraigned the day after on the 17th. He pled not guilty to all the charges. He has three very serious charges: racketeering conspiracy, that is like a criminal enterprise. In other words, everything he did, the government is actually stating in the indictment paperwork to the grand jury that all of his businesses are aligned for him to do whatever he wants, and that he actually has employees, people working for him, whatever, all involved in criminal illegal activities to promote his business, do his business, whatever. He uses every business that he has as a criminal enterprise to do what he wants. This actual charge has a maximum sentence of life in prison, and it is the most serious charge. It's often called RICO. Okay, so like when you hear RICO in regards to the charges, this is what they're talking about: how he influenced, peddled, how he, blackmailed, did whatever, all kinds of illegal activities under the guise of his businesses, using that network and all his connections to do it. The second charge was sex trafficking by force, fraud, or coercion, and that charge carries a maximum sentence of life in prison and includes a mandatory minimum sentence of 15 years. And then the third charge was added on: transportation for purposes of prostitution. He's being accused that he hired sex workers and brought them across state lines. And if he hired them, ergo, that's where the prostitution parts come in. This is in regards to his parties, what they call those Diddy parties. Um, and that's just the minor charge there. It's the lesser of the charges. It has 10 years in prison as the max. Okay. But they're saying that the intent of hiring the sex workers was to have them do prostitution during the parties. All right. So now, these are not all of the these are the charges in the criminal case. We are talking about the United States government versus Sean Combs. We are not talking about any of the charges that are in all of the civil cases that are against him, because those all came from that first civil case that dropped by Cassie Ventura, his longtime girlfriend, ex-girlfriend, who dropped a bombshell of a civil case. And we all read it. It had abuse in it. It had coercion in it. It had accusations of, car bombings. It had a lot in it. Some say that that could have been the trigger that started the raids on his home. However, it also looks like that investigation had to have been going on for a long time. They're kind of close together to have been inspired by the case. However, now there are rumors that it is Cassie Ventura that may be one of the witnesses or one of the victims in the government's case. Now, it's not unusual for the government not to say who they are. Government cases don't do that. They protect their witnesses. They usually keep everything close to the vest till right before trial. Now, we have a trial date in April of 2020, May of 2025 for P. Diddy. And that's pretty quick, considering everything that's been going on. Now, what I want to talk about is a lot of the motions. You see a lot in the news. Everywhere we go on the media, everything about P. Diddy, everything that happened. Well, we've had multiple bail hearings. This was the third attempt just recently. About a week or so ago, they had the hearing in regards to another attempt for bail. Preceding that bail hearing, there was a raid, or actually not a raid. It was a normal prison inspection for contraband and such like that. And the prison guards noticed things in P. Diddy's room that they brought in a special prosecutor to look at it before they got the prosecution team for the USA, for the government to look at it, so there'd be no like tainting of evidence or violating of rights and things like that. And this caused a big issue because, well, first of all, the defense attorneys in Sean Combs are crying foul. They think he's being persecuted. There's been quite a few accusations of prejudicial treatment. In other words, they're treating Combs different than they would anybody else. He's not allowed bail, but other people that get sex trafficking on them are. They refer to a CEO who's in his 80s who got out on bail, whose crime was 10 years ago, by the way, not current, like Sean's Combs are. And they tried to say that because he was a white older man with money, that Sean was being prejudiced against, and that the cases were similar. The judge kind of denied that. But I'm going to read all of that for you anyway, and we'll get into the details of it. But actually, the search and seizure, because Sean Combs was caught with quite a few items there that were of interest to the prosecution that led to witness obstruction, witness tampering, obstruction of evidence, bribe, trying to pay people for statements, contacting people from the grand jury. There was a lot there. Uh, there was a lot there. And also, the prosecution filed a motion to deny bail in regards to Sean Combs using other inmates' phones, violating the prison rules in regards to contact with the outside, how it's done. You're supposed to use your own number and you get a certain amount of time. All of the calls are recorded. The prosecution saying, why does he have to use other people's phones? Well, he doesn't want us to know what he's saying. But here's the thing, they know whose phones he used, and those calls are recorded also. So they had everything. Now, I've seen lawyers on other channels and actually saw two lawyers do this, and I want to mention it. They actually said, no big deal. He's violating prison rules. Everybody has a phone in there. Everybody uses everybody else's phone. That's not uncommon. It's no big deal. Well, unfortunately, it is actually. When you're trying to say you're going to obey the rules if you get out on bail, and you're going to just you're going to be under the supervision of your attorneys and your own private security, and you're trying to convince the judicial system that you're going to be a good boy, you're going to behave yourself, and then you're doing all of that. No, no. Like, why would they? Like, if you can't behave yourself while you're in prison, why would they let you out? If you're doing all of this while you're behind bars, why are they going to let you out to do it untethered? Okay, it gets really dicey. It does. Listen, Judge Subramanian. Okay, Judge Aaron Subramanian did a 5-page ruling on this, and I'm going to give you a link to it. But basically, I'm not going to read the whole thing, okay? Because, well, that would be like really, really long. Although I do love to read. Well, I am going to cover a couple of the key issues because it came to light. One of the things that the judge brought up in here was, first of all, the main reason that he said to deny the bail the third time, okay, for P. Diddy, this third time. Sorry, 3 strikes and he's still not out. And I don't think he's going to get out. Okay. Well, the main reason the judge put down was that no condition or combination of conditions will reasonably assure the safety of the community. In order, he has a propulsion for violence, and they have proved it. Okay. The court has evaluated each of the factors that must be considered under 18 USC for him to get bail, nature and circumstances of the offense charged. Okay. And that the weight of the evidence against the person, history and characteristics of the person, nature and seriousness of the danger that would be imposed by the person's release. And they have said the court finds that the government has shown by clear and convincing evidence that no condition or combination of conditions will reasonably assure the safety of the community. In support of this finding, the court provides the following reasons. A reputable presumption of detention applies to this case. Even if Combs successfully rebuts this presumption, a remand it remains one of the factors that the court considers in determining whether government has met its burden. The indictment charges Combs with serious and violent crimes. It alleges that Combs abused, threatened, coerced women and others around him to fulfill his sexual desires, protect his reputation, and conceal his conduct. And to do so, he relied on employees, resources, and influence of the multifaceted businesses empire that he led and controlled, creating a criminal enterprise whose members and associates engaged in and attempted to engage in, among other crimes, sex trafficking, forced labor, kidnapping, arson, bribery, and obstruction of justice. It says that Combs himself carried or brandished firearms to intimidate and threaten others, including victims of and witnesses to his abuse. And it notes that during searches of Combs' residence back in March of 2024, law enforcement seized firearms and ammunition, including 3 AR-15s with defaced serial numbers, as well as a drum magazine. When Combs' authority or reputation was threatened, the indictment alleges he and members of his enterprise engaged in acts of violence, threats of financial and reputational harm, and verbal abuse. These acts of violence, including kidnapping and arson. The indictment also charges that Combs with sex trafficking in violation of 18 U.S.C. And in the court to consider the nature and circumstances of the offenses charged is denying bail. That was one reason. The other reason was, okay, and it goes into much, if you read the document, it goes into much more legal language than I'm going to go into here. But another reason was that during the search and seizure, there were notebooks that Sean was writing plans, things to discuss, whatever. But on that, there was actual contact with a witness, and he documented everything that he was doing in regard and what he wanted her to say and how he wanted her to say it, how she was to go about it. And it kind of showed witness tampering in obstruction. The obstruction part is because the lawyers went into court in the oral arguments for bail and said in their protest about this search and seizure that these were all attorney-client privilege and everything was legal because they said those notebooks had legal marked right on it and that prosecution shouldn't have access to them. They had photographs, by the way. They didn't have the items. All of those were left. There was just photographs of everything taken. And that'll be important in a moment. They said that legal was written on all those pads, and there's no way that they should have looked at them or taken pictures of any of the contents, any of that. They went in court to the judge, put it on the record. Well, the judge took that into consideration, told prosecution they can't use these 19 pages that they had photographs of this information of obstruction for any other proceedings until they figured out whether it was attorney-client privilege, whether it was violating Sean Combs' rights in any way, which is reasonable. A judge hearing that is definitely going to do that. And after the hearing, the judge went back and looked at all the photographs from the first part where they used the third-party prosecution over here to look at it to see if it was pertinent to the case or if it violated anything. They thought it didn't, so they sent it to prosecution. Now the judge is trying to figure out if Sean Combs' rights were violated when they did that. So he goes and he looks at the original photographs of the evidence, and he sees that the word legal is not written on those pads. Not when the photographs were taken, not when the search was done. Someone wrote it on there after. Now, all of a sudden, the attorneys don't know how that happened. They're told by Sean Combs that it was legal and it was there the whole time. This is also in the 5 pages because these attorneys are telling the judge that Sean's going to behave himself and be a good person when he gets out here. And he's going to do what the attorneys say. And he's not going to have contact with anybody. And he just needs to be out to be free to work on his case, yada, 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 yada. And they know he's not going to do anything. So the judge listed all of that. Like, and in legal language, it was like a big, yeah, right. Because you can't control him. He's doing whatever he wants. He put his attorneys on the line there. He let his attorneys lie to the court under oath. I wonder who's going to still be his attorney. So far, they're all still there. I wouldn't be. But, hey, could have been a misunderstanding. Maybe he didn't tell him it was there all along. Maybe he just told him it was there, meaning I wrote it there, but not actually expanding on the sentence. Who knows? Benefit of the doubt, right? Like, we don't know for sure. We're not entitled to attorney-client conversations or anything that happens, and rightly so. That's between them. Let them work that out. but whoa, 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 that was something. Well, that's where we are with the bail. Now, another motion that was on there was the motion for the gag order. Okay, the another complaint from the defense really loudly is that this case is so high profile that that P. Diddy, Sean Combs, cannot get a fair trial, and that the prosecution is manipulating the media and leaking stuff and making it look bad and tainting the jury pool to be against Sean Combs, P. Diddy, and it's just crazy. They wanted a gag order on everything. Okay. And the motion for the gag order details were to prevent both sides of the case from making any public statements that could influence the case or potential jurors. And the defense team argued that statements from accusers and their lawyers, meaning in other cases, or even the witnesses, that they're trying to find out who the witnesses are in the government case. They think that it is some of those that are in the civil cases. And they're arguing that statements from accusers and their lawyers in the media are prejudicing Sean Combs unfairly. Okay. But that was denied. And I'll give you a breakdown why. The defense has not to date filed an appeal on the denial of the gag order that I could find, but and also, like, all of this is in PACER, but we're not allowed in the courtroom. We only get media coverage from court reporters from inside the courtroom, what happens during the hearings, as it's happening. Some of them will be on Twitter, some of them will be on YouTube, like Law and Crime, and actually talking to reporters that are inside the courtroom that can report later. Interviews and statements that were gathered based on that information and done by the attorneys indicate that one is possible because they're adamant that they need to get some type of gag order in place to ensure fair trial conditions and protect Combs's legal rights to a fair and unobstructed trial. Now the decision that was made by Judge R. Subramanian to deny that gag order was a bit complimentary. He did it at the end of November. It involved several key points, and he focused on the First Amendment right. The judge emphasized that the importance of balancing a defendant's right to a fair trial with the constitutional protections afforded by the First Amendment. This includes the rights of alleged victims to speak publicly. In other words, I can't tell a victim who's saying you did something not to talk about it. And if they've got their lawyers and they're doing their own cases, like, he can't do that. He also said there was less restrictive alternatives. That Judge Subramanian noted that gag orders are an extreme remedy. Okay, and should only be issued as a last resort. In other words, unless they're finding it like so damaging that they can't get a jury, they're not going to put an official gag order in place. He suggested alternative measures could be used to mitigate any potential prejudice to trial without infringing on free speech. One of the things he mentioned is P. Diddy's right to do contrary public relations work, like he did with his birthday party and Thanksgiving and stuff, and family talking for him and doing that, having more positive stuff out there to balance it, like under free speech. Um, he also talked about the broad restriction. He rejected the broad restriction on speech proposed by Combs' team. They wanted everything shut down, which would have gagged all of the witnesses, including those who may not even testify. And that's unfair. Arguing it would unjustly silence individuals not even directly involved in the trial. Now, their biggest issue is this is a big, high profile case, and all eyes are on it. And they feel it's tainting the jury pool. And they feel that also P. Diddy has made comments through his attorneys that this is affecting his businesses, his life, damaging him beyond anything. Like if he's found innocent, he's going to have everything gone anyway because of the publicity of all of this. And, that is a valid point. The things that he is accused of, people are running away from. People don't want to be in business with someone that is associated with these types of crimes. Period. It's a bad look. And so, even just being accused, but the government doesn't usually charge without a long investigation. And once they heard it was a government case, of course, he lost deals. He stepped down from CEO appointments, company head appointments. And I mean, he was the face of certain products that walked away from him. He's got the record company thing to do. He's There were issues, and there's gonna be, but that's not up for the judges to solve. There are plenty of high-profile cases out there, and it's not prejudicial or treating him unfairly to say, I'm not gagging the rest of the world because people are looking at you bad for what you're accused of. Because it's not a frivolous lawsuit. You're going to have your trial. He's going to do his best, Judge Submarinian, to make sure it's a fair trial, but fair for everyone. Now, the context, like I said, it's all about this media coverage, but especially around the leak of the video from the hotel of Sean Combs assaulting Cassie Ventura in the hallway. Now, the defense has accused the prosecution of purposely leaking an edited version of that tape to make Sean Combs look terrible to CNN for the purpose of ruining his reputation and tampering with the jury pool or whatever. So there's strong accusations against the government of the prosecutors, um, and about tainted evidence. Okay, well, the judge is looking into that, and no motion has come in regards to whether this has happened. However, what did happen is on November 1st, when they had the second bail hearing, the judge was told, the defense brought this up, and he asked the prosecution if they were the source of information in articles in regards to this particular issue, if they were the source. And they said no, and that they would provide an affidavit if needed, and they would put it on the record. At the time, the judge did not ask for it. But since we have a hearing coming up in December in regards to these kind of issues, the judge just yesterday had put in an order telling the government prosecutors to submit that affidavit because they're going to be discussing this issue in regards to evidence in prosecutorial misconduct, because the defense keeps bringing it up in regards to the prison search, which had nothing to do with the prosecution. They were alerted after things were found. They did not ask the prison to do the search. It was a regular contraband search, and there are no actual personal First Amendment rights to privacy or anything else in prison except for your attorney client discussions. Attorney client privilege would apply, period. You don't have those rights in prison. They record everything. You have to follow. contraband rules. If what you have is illegal, they take it. You don't get it back. You don't get to say, like, oh, send it to so and so. No, it's theirs. Like, you weren't supposed to have it. No, there are contraband rules. There are rules you have to obey. And they may seem like violations to your privacy and this and that, but boo hoo, that's what happens when you're in jail. If you are, so those rights don't apply. They're screaming and yelling about things they really can't. The prison doesn't have to give the attorneys or Sean Combs a heads up when they're going to search cells. No, they don't. No, they don't. And they don't care if your feelings are hurt. They do not. Okay. Now, we know that the judge has denied the gag order. Well, he did issue an order reminding both parties of their obligations under the law regarding confidentiality of the grand jury proceedings, where they presented evidence in things and witnesses, and that you don't talk about that stuff until we get to trial, aiming to prevent any further leakage of information that could affect the trial's fairness. So, in other words, if that video got leaked by CNN, the prosecution's saying they didn't do it, even though that video was part of the evidence and will be part of the evidence against Sean Combs. Apparently, from the filings going back and forth, it does appear that that was used in the grand jury indictment presented to the grand jury to get that indictment. It is part of the charges. There were affidavits from the witnesses who are not going to be named for quite some time. And actually, the defense has come forward to the judge and told them that he didn't tamper with any witnesses in regards to the grand jury. But the recent information that came out of that prison search indicates otherwise. Also, documentation of the phone calls that he has been making. They documented quite a few of them, contradicting the lawyers' on record statements to the court that no, he didn't. Well, no, he didn't, but here it is. Again, brought up by Judge Submarinian in his order of denying bail. If you cannot control him while he's in jail, how are you going to control him when he's out? Again, there's a motion out here from defense that they have pushed for the disclosure of all the names of Combs' accusers, saying they can't prepare a case against it unless they know who it is. But they haven't even got to the end of discovery figure, and the government has quite a time before they have to list who the actual witnesses are on the list and who did what. They haven't turned that stuff over yet, and with the bail stuff going on back and forth, you can see why. And now they're just pushing for it. They want it open. They argued that knowing the identities is crucial for preparing an adequate defense, and that's reasonable, especially given the complexity of the charges involving multiple alleged victims and etc. Okay, there's not been a clear final ruling on that because we're not at the end of discovery, and it hasn't got to the point where the government has refused to give them to them. They're just not doing it yet. And that's not unusual for a government case. And the judge knows that. And I think the defense attorneys actually know that also, but they're going to push now because the sooner they get them, the sooner Sean can use somebody else's phone to give him a ring, right? I know that was a bit sarcastic, but I couldn't help it because I just can't believe that he's doing all this out in the open and thinking that nobody's going to notice, that it's not going to be used against him. I just don't understand that rationale. But then again, maybe he's not thinking rationally. Maybe he's not used to being told what to do. I could see that. Okay. Now we also have motions that are pending relating to the evidence. And again, this is going to bring up again the search and seizure. A huge contention over the material seized from Combs' jail cell, with the defense arguing that those items were labeled, like I said, legal, and they should be protected under attorney-client privilege. I do believe that that has been pushed on the wayside by the judge. However, we're not going to know finally until he writes the written order, and they're probably going to talk about it in December again because it does look like it is. If he's asking for affidavits from the government in regards to the media and the video, then of course he's going to make them put on record about, like he did ask them to figure out how the heck they could make a statement about that wasn't true, and whether or not the prosecution can use the 19 pages of information that they got on his doings in jail in regards to the witnesses. Now, that could be important later. I mean, that could be additional charges. I mean, look at it. That definitely could be additional charges. The video evidence. The defense has accused the government, like I said, of leaking that hotel video. And they're also saying that the integrity of the evidence is in question because they're saying that it was leaked, but it wasn't played in full. And they're accusing the prosecution of actually editing it to just the section that made them look bad and putting it out there. In Well, there's no real evidence that any of that happened, and that is why the judge is actually asking for the affidavit from the government, because they didn't do it. Okay, but here's the thing: it kind of shows where the defense is coming from in how they're going to be attacking things. They're going to just say that there's prosecutorial misconduct and challenging the evidence at every state, that the prosecution is just like slamming Sean Combs, like almost like, we don't like him, we're taking him out, regardless of whatever it is. But like I said, it's going to depend on the next hearing what happens with that evidence. Okay, this was the order. I'm not going to read it, but it actually said about they had time between the defense and the government to file their motions in regards to everything with the 19 pages, in regards to the gag order, regards to the evidence with the tape in the media complaint. They're gonna do all of that, and they'll be doing that in December. But these were the deadline dates. Okay. There's some other motions that could come that aren't actually there yet. The hint of a superseding indictment. With everything that Sean has been doing inside jail, that prosecution has gone and actually documented very well for the judge through the last two bail hearings. Um, it's possible that they could actually put on some obstruction charges and some interference. So I don't know if they could just get them for just violating the prison rules. I don't think they'd make that part of this case. Those kind of cases usually come after, or they put charges separate for a different thing in a different hearing in regards to the prison. But it could be some new charges coming forward, or actually charges added to this indictment in regards to it. Another thing that the defense should actually be looking at with all of this mentioning constantly about the jury pool being tainted, a change of venue is definitely something that they want to look into. It's a government case, which is why it's coming out of SDNY in New York. Okay. It is actually the USA, the United States of America versus Sean Combs. Okay. It's not the state of New York. It's not the Southern District of New York, although that's the court that is actually handling the case, and the prosecutors, Damian Williams. Okay. But the high profile of this, there could be motions coming forward down the line to ensure an impartial jury pool. And that kind of makes sense, doesn't it? Like, when you think about it. And then again, like I said, discovery motions, we're going to be starting in the discovery phase in typically, like, that's going to go back and forth, and they're going to fight tooth and nail. If they're already fighting about the video, just imagine how the rest of it is. Every statement, every person. That's why they want these people's names. They want to dig up everything they can on them and challenge every scenario. And they should, in order to do a good defense. But they don't get them yet. Okay. And they are going to keep asking for more and more evidence from the prosecution and challenge all of those materials. Now, don't be surprised if you hear a lot of whining for the defense when they get that discovery dump and they find out how much of an investigation was done by the FBI and the government before they filed these charges. I'm predicting and putting on the record terabytes, terabytes, and a major motion from the defense to delay the trial. because they're so busy with the media and trying to get Sean Combs to behave in jail. I don't see how they're going to have time to actually go through all that evidence right away. It's like, and this trial's in May. It's December. We're talking less than 6 months. Like, right? Not, I mean, just makes sense to me. Just common sense, right? All right. Let me bring myself back up from my little picture. See? I didn't go way too far. Now, that pretty much gets us up to date with Sean. Like I said, we do have a hearing in December. And we're going to keep track on if there are any other orders from the judge or decisions rendered from the judge on any of those other outstanding motions in between. But it does sound like he's gathering information for the December hearing, and we'll probably gather more information there, and we probably will not get any decisions until after that date, and sometime before the end of December, we would hope.